Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about QAnon. Um, is the QAnon movement a tragedy, a danger, or a terrorist group? Technically, it's all three of the fucking above. Half the people who stormed the Capitol back in January were QAnon believers, and they were mentally ill and dangerous fanatics. Um, a significant number of QAnon followers, according to NBC News reporter Ben Collins, believe that the end point of their religion will be reached when Donald Trump takes back control of America, which won't happen anytime soon, and unleashes police to mass arrest elected and other high-profile Democrats and QAnon followers that engage in an orgy of violence and murder against Democratic Party aligned neighbors, friends, and family. Already, one believer has murdered two of his children, claiming that they had serpent DNA and they had to be killed to save humanity. There's evidence that a majority of the people who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, leading to more than a half dozen deaths and nearly overthrowing our republic, were basically QAnon cult members. This isn't quite as weird as it sounds. Mass death or even murder of the unbelievers, often for political or end-of-day rationales, is a familiar trope within the multiple world religions. Over the years, Tom Harmon has spent a lot of his time in Israel, which is frequently the target of evangelists trying to convert Jews in anticipation of the end times. Many of these evangelists are quite upfront about their belief that in the end times, in preparation for the return of Jesus Christ, the visible fairy man that lives in the sky with his invisible Father, all about 144,000 of the roughly 7 million Jews in Israel have to die. And those who survive will be all converted to Christianity and wear the names of the Father and Son on their foreheads throughout eternity. And when that happens, Jesus Christ comes down from the sky. Yeah, bullshit. It's a belief that millions of Christians and a solid majority of white evangelicals fervently hold, and one of the reasons why there's so much support for Israel among the Republican white evangelical movement, and that's where the mass death has to happen to bring back Jesus. Now, this is some crazy shit. Jim Jones and David Koresh, two prominent cult leaders, were proponents of such end-time beliefs. Among others, and Adolf Hitler leaned heavily on Christian themes and prophecy to justify his slaughter of the Jews, Roma people, and the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender folks. Basically, Hitler said this: "In defending myself against the Jews, I am acting for the Lord." No, you're not. The difference between the church and me is that I am finishing the job. You're technically got a job as a murderer, but that is not really doing the job of the Lord. There are similar death cult movements within the Sunni Islam, most famously offshoots of the Wahhabism or something like that. That's as widespread in Saudi Arabia as evangelical Christianity is in the United States. In both cases here, the death cult aspect of these religions has emerged in just the past two centuries. The most spectacular unveiling of Wahhabism's unwillingness to kill was seen by the world on September 11th of 2001 when they attacked the World Trade Center. The genocide of Muslim Rohingya people in Myanmar by the Buddhist majority, which is mostly promoted via Facebook, which has been accused of complicity in the slaughter, was justified, they said, by the religion of Buddhism. And Buddhism is generally considered to be one of the more peaceful religions among the Great Faiths. Much like the Old Testament documents in the Bible, numerous slaughters called for or approved by God, particularly in the book of Joshua. The Hindu Vedas detail multiple, sometimes genocidal wars, both as metaphors for the battle of inner peace and enlightenment, and as actual historical stories. So what are we to make of the apparent reality that several million Americans, many suckered into this by Facebook and other social media sites, just like the killers in Myanmar, are followers of a religion that either predicts or calls for the death of Jews or Democrats? So far, they've racked up an impressive record by American cult standards, and these are the ones that are included. An Arizona resident blocks a bridge near the Hoover Dam with an armored vehicle. He later pleads guilty to a terrorism domestic charge. A California man is arrested after being found with what appeared to be bomb-making materials in his car and an alleged plot to blow up a satanic display in the Capitol in Springfield, Illinois. In Staten Island, a 24-year-old man allegedly murders a leader in the Gambino crime family. A QAnon supporter allegedly smashes up the chapel of the Holy Hill in Sedona, Arizona, while shouting about the Catholic Church supporting human trafficking. Montana police arrest a QAnon supporter from Colorado in connection with an alleged kidnapping scheme. A Kentucky mother is charged with kidnapping twin daughters. A man is charged with intentionally derailing a freight train near the Navy hospital ship Mercy in Los Angeles. A woman is arrested after driving to New York and allegedly making threatening statements against Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. A Boston man leads police on a 20-mile chase while live streaming himself talking about QAnon. Corey Huron, who's a reservist in the Canadian Rangers, allegedly rams a truck through the gates of the Prime Minister's residence in Ottawa, Canada. A Texas woman is arrested after allegedly chasing and crashing into a car, and then she tells police that she thought she was chasing a pedophile. Utah woman arrested in Oregon for allegedly kidnapping her young son. All apparently in the name of QAnon, the religion that has now become the core of their lives. And that doesn't include the better-known instances like the guy who shut up a pizza joint in Washington, D.C., looking for a supposedly basement where Hillary Clinton had hid children whose blood she was going to drain to obtain adrenochrome, or the fellow who blew himself up in front of the AT&T building in Nashville to stop the lizard people. One theory is that a tribe of the mentally ill are finding each other through Facebook and other social media, and being led by Donald Trump himself, Donald Trump himself is a case study in mental illness because he's mentally ill. The University of Maryland's National Consortium for the Study of Terrorism and Response to Terrorism notes that 68% of the open QAnon followers arrested at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and who had also committed crimes before or after the coup attempt, have had documented mental health concerns according to court records and other public sources. And their psychological issues included post-traumatic stress disorder, paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and Munchausen syndrome by proxy. The QAnon shaman of so many iconic January 6 pictures has now pleaded that he's pleading that mental illness is his reason for showing up at the Capitol, as to have two others who were found to be mentally unfit to stand trial and were transferred to mental health care facilities. Of six of the women that were arrested on January 6, who had also committed crimes before or after the coup attempt, the researchers noted all six have documented mental health concerns, and that's probably far too glib an explanation. Tens of millions of Americans are members of odd cults, many that believe in the end times, and most mental health professionals would be reluctant to call them all mentally ill anyway. And mainstream Christians teach their children about a guy who was flying reindeer, after all, and most Americans profess to believe in a Jewish guy 2,000 years ago who rose from the dead after walking on water and turning water into wine. Another theory is that QAnon is meeting some deep social or psychological need for people who otherwise feel marginalized in society. A year of lockdown from COVID could certainly exacerbate this loneliness and search for a community and belonging. Or maybe it's just the power of Facebook's algorithm and new group system. At the very least, it's been mobilizing QAnon-friendly or QAnon-aligned white people across small-town America. And last summer, on a warm Sunday night in the small Oregon town of Klamath Falls, about 200 local people showed up downtown with guns, baseball bats, and whatever other weapons they could find around the house to fight off the busloads of Black Antifa marauders who they believed that Jewish billionaire George Soros had paid to put on a bus in Portland and was sending their way. Of course, George Soros had nothing to do with such a thing, and there were no busloads of black people. But the warnings were all over the Klamath Falls Facebook group, and it turns out similar Facebook groups for small towns all over America. And literally, from coast to coast that weekend, white residents of the small towns showed up in their downtown areas with guns, rifles, hammers, and axes, prepared to do battle with busloads of black people being sent into their small white towns by George Soros, which nothing happened. Nothing of that sort did. And nobody's sure whether these messages, which activated frightened white people across the nation, came from local white supremacist groups trying to gauge if they could actually kick off a Second American Civil War, or whether they came from some foreign government trying to tear America apart. But it worked. In the tiny town of Falls, Washington, frightened white people brought out chainsaws and cut down trees to block the road leading to their town. In South Bend, Indiana, police were overwhelmed by 911 calls from frightened white people wanting to know when the Antifa buses were going to be arriving, and that didn't happen either. And no Antifa buses showed up. And in rural Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, the local neighborhood social media group warned people that busloads of black people were organizing a riot and to loot. And similar stories played out that week from Danville, California to Jacksonville, Florida, which is well documented by NBC News. A few weeks ago, Facebook announced it was banning QAnon groups from the platform, but if its history of banning the right-wing extremism and co-mobilize is any indication, it's going to have very little impact. So what do we do about the cult-aligned neighbors who are fantasizing about killing Jews and Democrats? The FBI has already designated the group as a domestic terrorism threat, and although the laws against domestic terrorism are somewhere between weak and non-existent, and for good reason, if you're a fucking progressive, For example, you would want the force of the federal government coming after you for domestic terrorism during the Trump or Josh Hawley administration. And that's exactly what's happening in Russia, Hungary, and Turkey at this moment, and by way of taking down political opponents of those authoritarian regimes. Deprogramming cult members is a terribly weak game of a whack-a-mole. One of Tom Hartman's closest friends had worked with Ted Patrick back in the 1980s, deprogramming cult members who had been kidnapped or lured away from their cults. It was the tiniest of drops in the bucket, although the deprogramming industry may reemerge as COVID wanes. Are most of these people just so deeply craving social connection and meaning in their lives that QAnon is for the moment meeting those needs? If so, that was probably the case with many of the cults that were widespread back in the 1970s and 80s, and odds are, as the cult is discredited, that they will fall away and join organizations that offer a healthier outlet for their social and activist needs. That's certainly what happened in the 1980s around the McMartin preschool trial. That basically the teachers were accused of ritual satanic child abuse allegations that bears such a striking resonance to QAnon's assertions that Democrats are drinking children's blood and new satanic rituals, which they're not. And given that millions of Americans are now members or followers of QAnon, it's also possible the religion will undergo the same kinds of transformation that many of today's smaller but mainstream religions have. The Seventh-day Adventists, for example, started out as a doomsday cult and is now a healthy and respectable Christian sect, and ditto for the Mormons, the Salvation Army, and some would argue the Jehovah's Witnesses. On the other hand, if the emergent leadership in QAnon continues to center their religion around defying Trump and fantasizing about killing Jews, Democrats, and elected officials, it will continue to evoke more and more in the direction of being a political hate group like the Klan rally, which has its own set of Christian-aligned and anti-Semitic theories, and to that end the FBI is now tracking the movement. But it's not surprising that America, which has been an incubator for weird cults for much of our history, particularly dating back to the 1600s and the late 19th century, has come to a place with its new cult, which is now spilling over worldwide. And there are still open questions about how much of the Q activity in this country is being incited or driven by foreign actors. Over time, QAnon will probably either become more of a mainstream religion social club with a gradually normalizing belief set, or they will continue down the anti-Semitic and racist rabbit hole and shrink in size as its willingness to condone violence becomes more problematic. However, this all stakes out if a member of your circle of friends or family has fallen into a cult, cutting them off altogether, and that may be the least useful strategy. It would just drive them deeper into the cult, seeking a replacement for lost friends and family and affirmation of their new worldview. If they're hoarding weapons and talking about killing Jews and Democrats, though it's a good idea to flag the family members and let someone in the law enforcement community know, freedom of religion is one of America's top values and it deserves respect. But terror groups, on the other hand, have no place in a civilized society. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.